Today, our message is from Judges 19, through 1 through 15. The message is entitled Life Without God. So as we will share the grace of the word under the title of Life Without God, although we haven't read the entire chapter 19, I'm going to share about the entire chapter of Judges. Chapter 19 of Judges, right before then it was about the story of Samson. And after Samson died, it's the end of the Judges. Chapter 21 is the last chapter. And in the Bible, it records about the Levite and his concubine. A Levite and his second wife. And we want to go over why God put this in the Bible. As we just read, chapter 19, it's very terrible. And even though we haven't read the entire thing, if we look at the details, there's nothing normal about this. It's unusual, not the norm for a Levite to have a concubine, which is a second wife. And it's funny that the concubine was pronounced. And after that, the Levite goes to pick up the concubine. And he goes all the way to Bethlehem. On the way back with the concubine, and they try to sleep overnight at a place where the same tribe, the tribe of Benjamin, lives. And they meet an old man there. And the old man says, you could stay overnight at the old man's house, and he invites him over. However, there are bullies and like gangsters of Gibeah province comes to tell the old man to give up the Levite. Easy said, they're saying that they're going to rape this man. This story is very similar to something that we read in the past. It's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is what happened. And this exact scene is happening again here. That instead of giving away the Levite, the old man will give away his maiden daughter and Levite concubine. So he tells them to do as they please with her. And he just says, don't touch this guy. How amazing is this? It's saying that I'm going to give you my daughter and the second wife, and tells him that don't touch this guy. This is unbelievable and uncomprehendable. But the bullies, they didn't listen to the old man and kept on saying, give me the Levite. And he throws his wife out on the street. And that his the Levite's concubine was raped all night and died. The Levite divided the body, cut the body into 12 pieces, and sent it to each tribe of Israel. Isn't this a very terrible, absurd incident? But why did the Bible record such a terrible event in such details? As if it was recorded as someone has seen it and has described it in here. At that time, Levi people were so corrupt. The people of Israel were corrupted. Was it to show that? To show us this? Of course. It may be true. That may be a primary, information to inform us. However, that is not the entire point. That is not the main point. This is an example that happened a while ago. Not long ago, an incumbent German teacher was in court on charges of luring a mechanic with a dating app and killing him in pieces and eating part of his body. The story was this. This story came up many times. And also in Korea, there was a cut murder case. The whole nation was angry at that time. But today, these murders of cutting people into pieces often occur. This is not necessarily an event that happens among strangers. Couples argue with each other, resulting in murder. And in some cases, even children do that to their parents and chop them up into pieces. These things are not just a problem in Germany or Korea. These terrible things happen often in the United States and other countries we live in very frequently. So this terrible and cruel crime that we think of is occurring anywhere in human society in any cases. These terrible things are happening in human society, both East and West. It's happening amongst the humans. So then, why are these terrible things happening? These things that you don't even want to imagine, that we don't even want to put it inside our mouth. These cruel and terrible things, why are these things happening? It gives us an answer in verse 1. Now in those days, Israel had no king. There was a man from the tribe of Levi living in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim. And we look at today's message, there was a period of time where there was no king in Israel. It was a time where there was no king in Israel. What does this mean? This means that individually they do whatever they feel. They become their own judge. That means they removed God from their hearts. That God no longer lives there, and that's what it's saying. So then what happens? Humans, so they do whatever they want, whatever they please, and the right and wrong is decided upon themselves. If they do whatever it is that they want to do, if there's anything that hinders them, whatever it may be, they will remove it. Easily said.
각자의 마음속에 왕의 통치, 은혜, 자비가 사라진 시대였다라는 것입니다. 강한 자가요, 약한
In other words, the 4 years in the era in which the king ruled, grace and mercy disappeared in each person's life. The strong trample on the weak at will, and the weak join forces to trample the violent, violate the weak. So you can't find grace or mercy here. So Paul says this. The apostle says when he sees this in Romans 1:28, says since they thought it was foolish to acknowledge God, he abandoned them to the foolish thinking and let them do things that should never be done. God said, so you do as you please. Those who did not want to keep God in their hearts. Then we talk about the humans have done in verse 29. So what happens to the human beings? You know what humans... Let's look at Romans 21, verse 29 to 31. Let's read it slowly. Their lives became full of every kind of wickedness, sin, greed, hate, envy, murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, and gossip. They are backstabber, haters of God, insolent, proud, and boastful. And they invent new ways of sinning, and they disobey their parents. They used to understand, break their promise, are heartless, and have no mercy. When God said, do as you please, what happens in the human's heart? All of these sinful things, it came out through our lives, to the humans' lives. If we remove God from our heart, the result becomes, in Romans chapter 1, verse 29 to 31, that we become an extremely sinful, unbearably sinful. The humans become so terrible. Paul's telling the Romans in a letter that if God is removed from the human's heart, the man becomes such a terrible being. And this is what Paul is telling the Romans through his letter. And we look at chapter 19 of today, Judges. It illustrates the phenomenon caused by the removal of God from their hearts, from their lives. The Bible teaches us how terrible and cruel individual groups or families can turn into by removing God from their minds. And this is what the Bible is teaching us today. Our congregation that I love, in the Bible, everyone in the world is judged for their sins. And there is one person that has been saved. Who was that? That person is Noah. And we look at Genesis chapter 6, 5 through 6. Let's read it together. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. And it broke his heart. God knew that all human thoughts and plans were always evil. Then how could God have lamented that he made them?
그러나 노아는 여호와께 은혜를 입었다.
Genesis 6:8 says, but Noah is covered in God's grace.
은혜를 입었다. 이렇게 말씀을 합니다. 자, 그렇다면 여러분, 노아가 하나님께 받은
What grace did Noah receive from God?
하나님께 받은 은혜가 무엇이죠?
What was the grace that Noah received from God?
그것은요. 그 시대에 죄악들로부터
That he was protected from sin.
그러니까 그 시대의 죄악으로부터요.
That he was protected from sins of all the time. And he protected Noah.
하나님께서는요. 노아에게 은혜를 베푸셔 가지고요.
God had prevented from being tainted by the sins of that era. God gave Noah grace so that he could not be stained with the sins of that time. When we see violent criminals in this society, we say in our hearts, this is how we feel. Such a bad person, that person should be put to death. And these are things that we say. And we point our fingers to them. And we say, I'm qualitatively different from those criminals, those bad people. I'm better than that person. I'm different from that person. And we have that in our hearts. John the Apostle shows our appearance through the incident of a woman who committed adultery in chapter 8 of the Gospel of John. In chapter 8, the Gospel of John describes the Pharisees bringing to Jesus the woman who committed adultery. If you look at chapter 8 and verse 5, it says, the law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? This is a question that they ask. They're trying to put Jesus in a dilemma, and that's why they ask this question. Try to trap him, and they ask him this question. But what did Jesus say? In verse 7, 8-7, it says, he said, the innocent among you should first hit her with the stone. This is what he said. Then the people heard this and felt guilty from their hearts. There were adults, the young people at the scene of punishing women. How did they try to stone this woman? What kind of heart did they have? Is it because they wanted to just throw some stone and have fun? They're thinking, I'm better than her. That she's a terrible person. That was probably what was in their heart. That they wanted to show that they were such a better person than this woman. I'm a much better person than she is. And to show other people that they were a better person than her. Then what did Jesus do? He made every single person over there to look back on themselves. Each of them made them look back on their sins and appearances.
주님께서는
The Lord has made us
이 가늠한 여인의
look
죄악을
back
통해서요.
on each of our sins
그 죄악을 돌아보게 하신
through the
것입니다.
sins of a woman who committed adultery.
저는 주님께서는요. 타인의 죄악을 통해 사회의 죄악을 통해 먼저 나를
As such, the Lord first looked back to me through the sins of others and through the sins of our society.
나는 교회 생활 잘하고 있어. 신앙 생활 잘하고 있어. 나는 믿음이 좋은 사람이야.
We think that, we are
신앙 생활 잘하고 있지.
doing a great job,
다른 사람들에게 본이 되는
that I'm an example of other people.
누가 봐도 나는 사람들한테 칭찬받을
I am always complimented by the world.
이런 생각들이요.
And these are
모르게 우리 마음에
filled in our hearts.
그런데요. 이 요한복음 8장의 이 사건을 통해서요.
But through John chapter 8,
우리에게 지금요.
this is what Jesus is saying to us,
다시 한번 뒤돌아
to reflect back on ourselves and on our sins.
우리가 이 사사기 이 19장에 나와
If you're not
있는 이 이야기
committing the same sin
레위인과
as the
같은
Levites in chapter 19 of Judges,
범하고 있지 않고 또 우리가 이 베냐민
and God is
사람들처럼요,
preventing our sins
같은 죄악을
so far
범하고
unless we are
있지
committing the same sin
않은 사람은요,
as the Benjamin.
그것은 지금까지요 전적으로 우리 하나님께서
And solely
여러분과 저의 그 죄악을 막아 주셨기
it's because God has protected us from committing those sins.
우리가요 그들보다 뭐 다른 그들과
It's not because we are different from them, we are better than them,
우리가
but because we are
신실하고 더
more
도덕적이기
faithful
때문이
and
아니라
moral than them. It's not because of that,
하나님께서
but it's because God has prevented us from being stained and tainted with such sin, and He blocked us and protected us. And that's why we haven't committed the sins that the Levites,
지파처럼 이런 죄를 범하지 않고 있는 거지.
and that is why we haven't committed these type of sins. If we don't have that protection from God,
별반 다름없이 이런 죄악을 지을 수
that we can
있는
commit
사람이라는
these type of sins. And this is the message that God is wanting to share with us today.
그렇기 때문에
And this is
여기에서
the reason why we need to be humble and have humility needs to come out.
하나님이 없었다.
That we need to say, without God, I could have become a villain like the people on the television that we see, or even more vicious than them. If it weren't for God's grace, the people of the Levite, that we would have become more of a sinner than them if we didn't have God's protection. The humility can emerge from this perception of God's grace and the perception of who I am.
우리는 순간순간 하나님을 믿는다 하면서도
Every single moment we claim that we believe in God and we try to use our head.
순간이 되면요 내 머리를 돌려서 결정을 하려고 한다.
And so many times we use our brain and try to make decision. How is there going to be a beneficial for us?
우리가 지금 이 자리에 나와 있을 수 있는 것은
The reason why we're able to be here
우리들에게 은혜를 덧입혀 주셨습니다.
is because God has provided us with His grace.
그래서 우리는요 하나님의 그 은혜에 대한 인식과 또 내가 어떠한 사람인지에 대한 인식이
So we have to understand who we are.
우리가 이 땅에서 겸손한 삶을
That is how we can live on this earth humbly.
사랑하는 성도 여러분,
Congregation that I love,
사사기 19장의 말씀
the word of chapter 19 of Judges today shows how corrupt
하나님이 왕 되심을 인정하지 않고요. 하나님을 자기네들의 삶에서
they did not cruel and violent an individual, a family, and the nation can become
한 가정이 한
by removing God from their lives without acknowledging God as their king.
얼마나 흉폭해질 수 있는지를요. 지금 보여주고
is revealing to us how corrupt and cruel and violent a person can be. In many cases,
연말이나 새해가
we look
되어서
back
그때쯤
and make a
우리가
decision and make a
마음을
new
좀
decision at the
되돌아보며
end of the year
새로운
or on the new
결심과
year.
결단을 하곤 합니다. 비록 여러분 지금 연초도 아니고
Even though it's not the
아직
beginning of the
연말도
year or the end of the year,
지금이라도 아니 지금부터라도
we should be able to think
내
about how
자신이
desperately
또 우리 가정이
we,
우리
ourselves, our
사회가
family, and our
하나님의
society
자비가
can
아니면
collapse unless
얼마나 처절하게 무너질
it's
수 있는지를
without
우리는
God's mercy.
생각하며
And we need to think of that.
이 남은 2021
At the end of 2021,
우리가 마무리해야
and we need to end the year that way.
오늘 하루를 우리가 살아갈 때 혹시
And we
여러분
live
마음
today,
가운데 선한 마음이
a
찾아오잖아요.
goodness of our hearts would come out saying,
하나님께서 오늘도
oh, God is
우리에게
giving me this kind of
이런
grace
은혜를
today as well.
베풀고 계시는구나. 나는 원래 이런
That I am not
존재가
this kind.
아닌데 이렇게 선한
I don't have this
존재가
goodness in
아닌데
my heart.
내가 이러한 선한 마음을 갖고 있게 된 것은
The only reason why that we have this grace and the goodness in our heart is because God has given this heart to us. And I want us to understand and think of it that way.
오늘 하루
And it
여러분의 삶 속에서 여러분의
and if we
마음
have a
가운데
sinful
나쁜
heart
마음이
comes
혹시라도
out
찾아온다면
and into our lives,
아,
we have to
예수를
believe,
믿는다고
oh,
하면서도
we claim that we believe Jesus,
악한
but the
마음이
evil heart
나에게
and the sinfulness still comes
정말
to
하나님의
me.
은혜가 아니면
That help me think that if it wasn't for God's grace,
나는 도대체 어떠한
then what
삶을
kind of sinful person would I have become? And these are the thoughts that we should have.
그리고 다른 이에게서
And we see evil from others,
모습이 보일 때
and we see that from other people.
우리 또한
We hope that
하나님의 은혜가
we will also have the humility of being people who can do so at any time, unless it's God's grace, that we can become
더한 사람이
like that person or even more sinful than that person. And I want us to have that type of humility.
그럼으로써
By doing so,
우리의 죄악과
that we need to know
타락은
how much
전적으로 우리가 얼마나
we are rejecting
하나님의 은혜를
and ignoring
우리가 거부하고
God's grace.
무시해서 우리가 얻은 결과인지를 그래서
And this is the result
알아야 될 것입니다.
of that.
우리의 삶과 혹시라도 또 성품을 통해서
That we all need to know
주변 분들에게
that the praise we receive through our lives and characters,
칭찬을 혹시라도 지금
and if we
받고
if we
계신다면
receive that from other people,
본래 그것은 우리 것이 아니라
that does not belong to us, that it belongs to our King, that all the glory and all the honor and all the praise should be received to God. And I want us to understand that, and we would really turn that around and give it up to God.
살아가는 여러분 되시기를 주님의 이름으로 축원합니다. 사랑하는 성도 여러분,
Congregation that I love,
하나님을 내 마음에서 제거해 버리면요.
please keep in mind that if God is removed from our hearts, then we will live a life of sin and depravity at all times. And I want us to fully remember that. And I pray in the name of the Lord that both you and I, that when we live a humble life, we will be blessed by God for giving us the grace and protecting us from sin, and remembering that we will remember that we will not live an evil life.